Hello, and welcome to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today, we are wishing a happy birthday to the Law School Toolbox with an episode about our top 10 lessons for law students. Your Law School Toolbox hosts are Alison Monahan and Lee Burgess. That's me. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, the Catapult Conference, and the Trebuchet Legal's Careers site. Alison also runs the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review on iTunes. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's get started.
Welcome back. Today we're celebrating the 4th birthday of the Law School Toolbox, which is really exciting. And we've been reflecting over the past couple of weeks about the things that we've learned over the past 4 years from working with lots and lots of law students about how to be a happy, successful law student. And in today's episode, we're going to go through our top 10 list of things that you can do to make yourself a successful law student without losing your mind. So Lee, what's first on the list?
First on the list is a throwback to one of our early podcasts, which is Mindset Matters. Because in the law school experience, we're all going to fail at some point, or at least stumble.
That never happens.
I know. But I think everybody's at least going to take a stumble and get knocked down a little bit. But while most people just focus on that failure or that stumble, what we've really learned is that it's what you do with that failure that matters. And that's one of the reasons why we talk so much about mindset.
Yeah, and I think you can see this oftentimes, when students approach us and they ask for help. Mm-hmm. Even in those initial emails, you can almost get a sense of who's really going to be able to receive that help in a way that really, propels them forward. Like sometimes people send an email saying, I just got my grades back and I feel really stupid.
Right.
And, that's kind of a red flag for us because what does that mean? That means that they have a fixed mindset about this. They're thinking, I'm stupid, I'm a failure, my grades are telling me that I'm bad at law school.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when we'll have like an initial call with a student and if they're reflecting on their first semester grades, I'll say, have you had a chance to, talk to your professors? And it's the students who are like, yes, I already have appointments with my professors to review my exams and find out what happened. And, kind of taking this very proactive approach. And then again, you're like, wow, this person is going to be able to take our advice and
right.
Probably incorporate it into their work and thoughtfully examine what they do and has a higher likelihood of success than somebody who says, no, I don't want to go talk to my professors, or no, that's going to be a waste of time. There's no, because that stuff makes you uncomfortable. And I think one of the things about the growth mindset is it gives you space to do some of the uncomfortable things without judging yourself.
Right. And sometimes, we'll talk to second or occasionally even third year students who have not been doing well. And we'll ask them that question, have you talked to your professors about your exams? They're like, God, no, why would I do that? That would be so horrible. Yeah. And it's like, well, who is it that's giving you these grades? What can they tell? And sometimes it's literally it's a year-long class and they have the same professor. And I'm just like, what do you mean? You don't want input from the person who's giving you the grade the next semester? This is kind of mind blowing to me. Mm-hmm. I get it. It's not fun. And, it can be scary. And you think maybe they're going to say something mean to you or just going to make you feel bad. But the reality is, just looking at it from a practical standpoint, this is the fastest way to get better is to figure out what this person wants you to do and do it.
Yeah.
So if you're not able or willing to do that, it's sort of hard for us to really help you.
Yeah. And anybody to help you. I mean, if you go to your academic support office at school and they will tell you also to go talk to your professors. And if you, it's you can ask for all the help you want, but if you're not willing to kind of, if you're not willing to put yourself out there and really ask the tough questions to change your situation, the likelihood that anything is going to change is not very high. So
right. And I think, we've talked about sort of having to sit with that discomfort. No one, we're not telling you that it's going to be the most fun day of your life, that half hour that you spend talking to your professor about why you got a C- in their class. Mm-hmm. But that's also, that information, if you can take it in a growth way, with a growth mindset and say, I'm just here to try to figure out what I need to do differently and what I need to do better. That's incredibly valuable.
It is. And if you can work on this skill in law school, I mean, we all, fluctuate, most of us, between the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. I know Alison and I do. We catch each other on it sometimes, and have over the last
we're like,
4
I'm
years.
just bad at this certain thing. And
Right.
it's like, well, this might not be like your most native skill set, but like, frankly, somebody needs to handle the payroll.
Right, exactly. So, learn it, make it work. But, I think it's important to realize that you're actually cultivating skills for your practice of the law too, because every lawyer I know also stumbles and fails or makes a mistake. And it is what you do with that information or that experience that is so important. I even remember being a clerk at the U.S. Attorney's Office my first summer between my 1L and 2L year, and I'd made a mistake in pleadings. You could actually get certified to appear in court, and I was doing pleadings for misdemeanor cases, and I totally screwed up. Like I totally screwed up. I didn't edit the document completely correctly. I didn't fully understand what my assignment was. My supervisor was super busy. She didn't catch it. And I got yelled at in open court.
Whoops.
Like for a while. And I remember actually leaving. And of course, then my supervisor's he wasn't really yelling at you. He was really yelling at me. And I was like, I don't know, kind of felt like he was yelling at me. But I did have that, that crisis of faith of maybe I'm not meant to do this. I don't have a high enough attention to detail. How could I not, do this pleading right? I mean, I was this law student, I mean,
yeah, ultimately, if you look at it objectively, it's you screwed up. But ultimately, that wasn't completely your responsibility.
Right.
There's a reason you had a supervisor.
Right, exactly. But I think the reality is I started to go down that fixed mindset path. Maybe court's just not for me. I didn't understand exactly what I was supposed to do. I can't believe I got yelled at in open court. I shouldn't be doing this. Yada yada yada. And I actually remember calling my dad, who was a prosecutor, and I said, I got yelled at in open court. And he's like, great, you can check that off your list. And I was like, what? And he goes, everyone's been yelled at in open court. He's like, this is not the last time you will probably be yelled at in open court if this is what you decide to do with your life. He's like, so now it's happened once.
Welcome to the club.
Welcome to the club. And
it's the same thing in law school. Everyone says something in class that they feel is so embarrassingly horrible that they can't possibly live with it. But it's really just okay, welcome to the club. Now you have your story.
Right, exactly.
I've got a story. You've got a story. Pretty much everyone who's ever been to law school has a story about that time where you said this thing and, usually it's your favorite professor and you're turning purple and he's looking at you oh my God, this is the stupidest person I've ever seen in my life, or that's what it feels like. When actually he's just oh, okay, who might actually be able to answer this question and get me out of this problem?
Exactly. So mindset is a life skill to work on. And if you haven't listened to our podcast on mindset or checked out Carol Dweck's book, which we think is a great read, maybe on one of your breaks, it's a quick read. I think I've read it mostly on an airplane.
Exactly. I would say read it on a flight.
It's a great flight book, but I think it's worth it because it's something I think that will make you a better law student, but a better lawyer and a better career person no matter what you do.
Well, just a better person in general.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, and one of the ways that you can practice this, it's sort of, this doesn't have to be all dire, oh, it's so hard, I don't want to do it. I think it's actually interesting, and I do this intentionally, to pick something that I'm not good at that I want to learn. Mm-hmm. So I've taken classes in throwing on the pottery wheel. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be good at that the first time that you try it. But it's who cares? It doesn't matter. Yeah. Or I'm learning to ski or learning Spanish. I think if you can put yourself in these sort of not so weighted situations where you have an opportunity just to basically to play and to get better at something, it can be really useful to have those skills to carry over into your more serious professional environment too.
I think that's very true. So this was a big one. That's why I put it at the top of our list.
Right, and it's actually, this conversation segues really nicely into number 2.
Oh, you think I planned it that way?
You think so. And I think this is absolutely accurate. Our second one on the list is that law school is a learned skill. So no one comes into law school knowing how to read a case. No one knows how to brief a case. These are not skills you come out of the womb with. The reality is that this stuff is hard, and this might be the first time that you're not the smartest person in the room, but you can learn how to do it.
Mm-hmm. And I think we see this sometimes too with our Start Law School Right program that we run, or when we talk to 0 L's to 1 L's about what they're scared about. Is a lot of it is this idea of well, I'm not going to know what to do on day one, and it's okay, yeah, you can do some prep courses, you can get educated on, what the requirements are of class, but still, when you get to class, you're not going to really know what to do on day one, and that's okay.
Right, you're not supposed to know what to do.
You're not supposed to know how to write a legal brief on day one. You're not supposed to know how to do all your legal citations on day one. That's part of the process. And I think you have to go into it knowing that there's going to be a journey, and it's going to be challenging because the law at times can feel like you're studying a foreign language.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reality is the material you're learning is complicated. It's not simple. And the way that it's taught is frankly not probably the simplest way to teach it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of, I think we have an episode maybe about being a professional, but this is the idea of being a professional. It's like, these are your tools, these are your skills, and you have to get serious about mastering them.
Yep.
And, it's not that you're going to walk in and be like, oh my God, I'm so awesome at extracting the law from a case. Like, that's probably not going to happen initially. But you need to be sure that you, recognize that that is something you need to be able to do, which is sort of step one. And then practice doing it, whether it's, sitting in class and paying attention and making sure that you're actually getting the legal rules that your professor's talking about when you read a case, getting feedback, talking to your friends, all these things. You just have to have a plan for how you're going to learn these things.
Yeah. And I think this idea that it's like a 3-year journey if you're a full-time law student, that by the end you're going to be so much better at law school than you were in the beginning, and that you want to get to make these strides as soon as you can, because it often correlates to how well you do with your grades. But, it's a journey. It's a learning journey. And when you exit law school, you're going to leave with an entirely new set of skills. And that's how it's supposed to be. It's
like if you don't change or grow in the process of 3 years in law school, what are you spending $200,000 for?
It's so true.
Hopefully you're going to learn something.
Yeah. Exactly. And if you are struggling and you're not sure, how to better these skills, that's when you need to ask for help. And we're going to talk about that as one of our top 10 things too. But, you don't have to go through all this growth alone. There are plenty of resources.
Right, that's not very efficient.
Right. There are plenty of resources at your fingertips that you can use to make sure that you're getting the assistance you need to be as successful as possible. You're not an island. You're not supposed to do this on your own.
Right. And sometimes I feel like students feel like it's somehow cheating themselves if they don't figure out everything on their own. And it's just, I went to architecture school. The thought that you would build a building without blueprints is why would you want to do that? That seems impossible. It's kind of the same thing. It's you could just throw a pile of construction materials in front of your contractor and be like, okay, see you in a few months. But it's why would you do that? It's why would you show up to law school and just be like, oh, I'm going to figure out everything on my own. Here's some books. I'll take an exam in a few months. That's not a very good approach.
Yeah, exactly. I 100% agree. So besides just thinking about, 3 years is this kind of arc for being a better law student, we also think, and this is item number 3 on our list, that you have to think about your career from day one. And that does not mean that you have to know exactly what you want to do from day one.
Right. It doesn't mean that you have to be out greasing palms with the rest of the classmates at orientation. You're yeah, hi, I'm going to be your lawyer for life.
Exactly. But you do want to realize that part of the journey, since this is a professional school, is to figure out what you want to do professionally and to lay the groundwork. So when you're ready to seek job opportunities or internships or whatever you're looking for, that you have that network to pull on.
Yeah, and a lot of this is about relationships. So, you don't want to be that smarmy guy who's kissing up to everyone at orientation. But at the same time, you don't want to be hiding out in your room and not going to the big events that the school is throwing. Ideally, you need to make friends in your classes because these are the people that you'll know throughout your career.
Yeah. I refer people to law school classmates for legal services all the time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think you're right about, other sorts of networking, things like getting involved in school clubs or involved in the bar association early on. Your school might pay for you to go to a conference. That would be awesome. That you have these opportunities that I think sometimes it's easy to overlook if you're just head down, I need to study. And of course you need to study, but that's not all you need to do. I think at a minimum, even a first-year student should be spending, 5 or 10% of their time on a weekly basis thinking about job stuff. And no one does that.
No. And, that includes refining your resume and making sure you always have a resume to send
Right,
out.
exactly.
And,
because we get calls from students who are like, I just have an opportunity to apply for an externship for the summer with a judge who turns out to be a friend of somebody that I know. Like, do you think I should do that? I need to send it in today. And it's like, well, yes, good thing we looked at your resume like last month, because I do think you should apply for that.
Yeah, exactly. And also, if you're not sure what type of law you want to practice, you want to keep in mind that you're searching for your passion as you select classes, as you volunteer for events, as you go hear speakers, as you go to bar association events.
Work.
Right. It's your job to think about, exploring the different options, what clinics do you apply to? All of that stuff is going to help you lead to the point where you can decide what path that you might want to take, or at least the first path that you might want to take.
Right. There's a lot of it's iterative. You think like, oh, that sounds interesting. And you go to a couple of meetings of like, the Real Estate Law Society, and then you realize you're bored out of your mind. And you're like, maybe that's not the right choice for me. Or, you take a pro bono case and it turns out you hate doing divorce litigation,
Right. Exactly.
But you can't know that. It's much better to try that out when you're in school than when you graduate and you take your first job and suddenly you're like, wow, real estate finance really is boring. Mm-hmm. Better to know that in advance.
Exactly. So it's not to stress you out about jobs through your entire, 3 years, but it is that you went to law school likely to practice law. So you want to keep that on your radar throughout your entire legal career.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is sort of the growth mindset. Like, you don't have to approach it as like, I have to find like the right career for me right now. It's just like, it's an opportunity to explore things and see how you like them, and to pay attention, and to really think about like, is this something that I would be happy doing over the long term? And ideally, you can kind of narrow in on that through exploration.
Yep, exactly.
But only if you actually do it.
Right, which leads us to our next thing on our list, which is number 4, which is that you're going to need to hustle. So Alison, you're a big champion of the hustle. In fact, didn't you declare 1 year in the last few years the year of the hustle?
I think I did with one blog post, and I'm not sure I ever followed up on it because I got really busy. But yeah, by hustle, like, we're not talking about, shaking people down or anything like that. It's like, it's just this idea that, essentially it's the opposite of entitlement. Nothing's going to be handed to you, and nothing should be handed to you, and you can't expect life to be handed to you. It's up to you to make your decisions about, your career path and how you want that to fit into your life and how you're going to make it happen. And, it's the same sort of thing that goes back to talking to your professors. You might have to put yourself in situations where you're not totally comfortable yet. Mm-hmm. You may have to show up to a bar association event at some specialty bar that you're interested in and actually talk to strangers.
Yep.
Shocking, right?
So true. So true. Or, you might have to go to volunteer to help organize the, moot court arguments. And then you meet a bunch of practicing lawyers and, they find them intimidating, or judges or something like that. But all of those are opportunities for you if you see them that way. In fact, my moot court judge at law school my first year ended up being on my callback for my law firm job.
Oh, how handy.
Yes. So she couldn't quite place me until finally she realized that she had judged my argument, and it was a good thing I'd won because she was there. But, every opportunity, you kind of have to be thinking about, your professional persona and connecting with people. It's just part of the hustle. It's not going to be handed to you anymore. That's just the realities of the new economy and the fact that you're going to have to work to get the career that you want.
Right. And a lot of it's about being strategic. And I think it is about being professional, and it's about creating these opportunities. Sometimes people come to us and they're like, well, I don't know if I should bother going to this networking event because I'm not sure I'll meet anyone. It's like, well, you might not. It might be a waste of 2 hours. Mm-hmm. However, you might meet someone who turns out to be extraordinarily useful to your career path or to your life, or you might meet, your next husband or wife. Hopefully your first husband or wife. But, you just never know. And that's the whole point. If you're not putting yourself in this situation where good things can happen, they can't happen.
It's very true. What if we had never went to coffee?
Yeah, exactly. What if you had never tweeted me that link because you're like, oh, she wrote a similar article. Maybe I should build a relationship with this person. We wouldn't be having this podcast. This business would not exist. Certainly if no one could have predicted that one tweet would lead to, an entire business.
No, but the only way you can guarantee that it won't is by not doing it. So
yeah, exactly. People are like, oh, well, social media seems like a waste of time. And it's like, well, maybe it is if you don't use it, you know.
Right. If you don't use it to
if you're just sending out like,
engage.
you know, things about how awesome you are all the time, it's like, yeah, then maybe it's a waste of time. But if you know, with any of these things, if you use it in a sort of open way where you don't actually know what might happen, but you're setting yourself up for opportunities.
Yep. It's so true. So true. All right. So let's move back to the academic realm for our next item on our list. This is number 5, which is one of my personal favorites: practice, practice, and more practice. So yeah. So in fact, it's bar season, and so we're just telling people to practice all the time. But this is really the biggest, I think, stress point around law students. And, you know, they want to move forward in their academics. They want to be better prepared for exams, but they do not want to sit down and do the practice because it makes them uncomfortable. It can be frustrating, and it really alerts you to the fact that you may not have a mastery of the material. And so they just don't do it. And that is a huge mistake.
Huge mistake. And this, again, goes back to mindset. It's like if you take a practice exam and you miss something and your response is, oh my God, I should drop out of law school, I'm stupid. Maybe that's not the best use of your practice.
Yep, exactly. So students either don't want to do the practice, or they do the practice, but they don't want to get feedback because they don't want to get negative feedback. They don't want to rewrite it because they think it's a waste of time, which is absolutely not. Or they think there's nowhere they can get feedback, which is totally untrue. Your school likely has teaching assistants, academic support offices, you know, there are private tutors like what we do. There's so many options for you to get help to facilitate this work. And if you are not doing that at this point in the semester, whenever you are listening to this podcast, you should be practicing.
Exactly. Basically. Unless you're in like week 1.
Unless you're in like week 1. But basically,
we'll let you go until like week 3.
Yeah,
by
exactly.
week 3,
by
you
the
should be
time you're in
practicing.
week 3, week 4, there is something you can write about. There's absolutely something you can write about. And by losing those opportunities, you're just setting yourself up for not being prepared and not being able to compete with people who've been practicing the entire semester.
Yeah, because the reality is, like, you know, like we said, this is a learned skill. How are you going to learn that skill? By practice. End of story. Game over. Next one.
Yeah.
All right. So, and this is it's sort of a continuation in a sense, but number 6 on our list, and we see this all the time, is please, please, please do not wait for the bar exam to solve your academic problems.
Yeah. Heartbreaking. Yeah. So we are recording this during bar season, and so many folks who struggle with the bar exam are struggling with the exact same things that our 1Ls and 2Ls and 3Ls that we work with are struggling with. You know, doing legal analysis, working with the facts, you know, issue spotting, writing under time pressure, like using IRAC,
organization,
headers, like anxiety, you know, all of the stuff that everybody struggles with in law school. The bar exam takes all of those issues and typically makes them worse.
Yeah, it's like a pressure cooker.
It is. It's a pressure cooker. The time management piece is usually much more condensed. The stakes are so high. The anxiety is so much more. You study, most of us, for months on end to get ready for it. And so, and then if you failed once before, you just add in another layer of baggage. Because you're dealing really with a type of failure that most of us have maybe been fortunate enough not to have to struggle with. So,
right. I mean, you think it was bad to get like a B- in your 1L torts class, like try failing the bar.
Exactly. And I remember after I'd been working with bar students for a few years, a student came to me and said, you know, I so wish I had learned these lessons in law school because I would have gotten such better grades.
Yeah.
And I think that is so true. You know, the writing is on the wall for most people who study or who struggle with the bar exam because they struggle in those 1L classes. What they typically do is then they stop taking exam classes, which helps their GPA. They start taking paper classes and seminars. And so they maybe don't take a lot of bar electives. And then their GPA steadily goes up. So they feel like, well,
I'm getting this.
Yeah, okay. I got this. Like it's a learned skill. I am golden. Right?
Yeah, my professors are giving me better grades. I must know what I'm doing.
Exactly. And so then the problem becomes that the first time you do some practice for the bar, you are like catapulted back to where you were 1L here, and you're struggling with all those same problems. So just don't ignore these academic problems. There's so many opportunities for help. The longer you wait, the harder it is to undo some really bad habits that you've created for yourself. And the pressure just is on by the time you get to the bar. You cannot practice law.
And there's so little time.
There's so little time, and you cannot practice law without passing that silly test. So
yeah, and I think the reality is if your law school grades are not great, that's a serious sign that you need to deal with this before the bar exam, because there's a very tight correlation between particularly first year grades and not passing the bar.
Yes. Absolutely.
And this is true at every school. Like, if you look at the bar results by school, it does not matter what school you went to, someone is failing the bar in states like New York and California.
Yep. Absolutely.
Harvard, Columbia, Yale, somebody there is failing the bar.
Yeah, Stanford. Some years Stanford has done really poorly. And I think this past year, actually, wasn't it Hastings that did disastrously poorly compared to where they should be based on their rankings? And so, no one is safe. You need to take it seriously, but look for those warning signs and just fix the problems, people. Fix them.
Yeah, fix them. And this is on to number 7, which is ask for help when you need it.
Please just ask for help. There is no judgment that comes from asking for help.
And it doesn't have to be specifically academic. We've talked about a few minutes ago, we talked about getting help academically, but we're also talking about other aspects too. Like if I did a podcast the other day on pressure with someone who said, can you talk to me about test anxiety? And he said, look, most people who struggle with test anxiety, they struggle with anxiety. Mm-hmm. Like it's not test specific. It's not like in every other aspect of their life, they're doing, totally cool on this. He's like, they need to go deal with the anxiety, and then the test anxiety will take care of itself.
Yeah.
So this emotional support, therapy, like one of the best decisions I made, I guess it was a decision. It wasn't really totally optional since I was clinically depressed. My first year was to go get a therapist. And that was scary. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to do this. But it was one of the best choices I ever made.
Yeah. And I think just being open to support, even if you're just struggling with the fact that you really want to exercise, but you can't make yourself do it, like try and find a friend to go run with you or
join a class, get a trainer if you can afford that.
Exactly. But, doing things to reach out for support. I was having coffee with a friend of mine who's a coach who isn't, she doesn't coach lawyers necessarily. She coaches corporate clients. But I was asking her, like, what are the main things that you see? And she works with a lot of people who are in kind of middle management trying to break into upper management. Mm-hmm. And she said that oftentimes people either don't know how to ask for help or they just can't imagine asking for help in their network. They're struggling and they just can't admit that they're struggling and need help to get to this next level. And it's like how sad that is, because you are losing opportunities to better yourself, and be more successful just because you won't admit that something's hard.
Right. And I think, people, this can also be hard, but I think it's critical, to ask for help in your personal relationships. So, if you have a significant other who's alongside you while you're going to law school, like you can't just pretend that everything's okay. Like there probably are times where you're actually going to have to reach out to that person. And, law school's really hard on relationships, and it's really hard to, to go to somebody you care about and say, look, I'm really struggling here and I need your help. Mm-hmm. But that's the only way that things are going to get any better.
Yeah. And I think you have to realize that everybody's struggling. There was I'm on these mama groups on Facebook where people pass around all these, funny quotes or whatever to entertain mamas. And one of them was, the woman who looks perfect and is, has done her hair and has makeup on and is walking around with her infant. She is struggling just as much as you are. She's just learned to cover it up better than you have. This idea that like everybody has their own, pile of crap that they're dealing with.
Right. It's like you're comparing your inside feelings to someone else's outside appearance. Yeah. And it's like, that the perfectly coiffed person who shows up in class every day looking beautiful, like they may be dealing with all kinds of stuff that you have absolutely no idea about.
Yeah. Exactly.
And this might be their armor for the world, is at least I'm going to pull myself together and like put makeup on. Right,
exactly. I'm going to shower. It's going to be awesome.
So, you just don't know. And I think, this isn't just law school, it's life. Like everybody has something that's not going so well, probably.
Yeah. And our one side note to that, and we've talked about this in, I think, another podcast, but social media does not feed into this.
No, it's like everything's perfect.
Everything's perfect, you know? Like,
oh my God, your child's so adorable. It's like your child just threw up on you.
Right, exactly. You know,
right after this photo was taken. People
right, exactly. Adorable. You know, or, you know, you see somebody is, you know, on some meditation retreat and is so zen, and you're like, that person is still struggling with whatever they're struggling with too.
Yeah, they're putting this out there to make themselves feel better. Like, it's fine.
Yeah. So, you know, I think everybody has to kind of check themselves when they read social media to make sure that, you know, you're not saying, well, nobody else is struggling, nobody else is asking for help. That's just not true. They're just not talking about it.
Well, in law school, it's like everybody else is going to get an A. It's like, actually, that's just not statistically possible.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
You're all in the same boat.
Yeah. And I think number 8 kind of relates to this a little bit, but as a process of maybe asking for help, sometimes you have to define your own definition of success or create your own definition of success, because so often you can drive yourself crazy trying to strive for something that isn't authentic to you.
Right. And I think law school, you know, certainly attracts people who are perfectionists. Mm-hmm. And I think some of that is that a lot of people who are in law school maybe had parents who really pushed them to be perfect all the time. You know, to get the straight A's, to always have the perfect report card. And at some point, you know, and for some people, they've already realized this. Some people don't realize it until they make partner. But these external validators of success actually aren't that satisfying.
Yeah.
I mean, I can totally speak to this. You know, I was top of my class at Columbia and I was still clinically depressed, you know? Like,
and I think the earlier you start to think ahead about what success means to you, you know, and what you want your future to look like. You know, how much money do you need to make to create the lifestyle that you're excited about? You know, or what do you want to spend that money on? Or do you want to have money to travel? Then if that's a priority, then you better find a job that's going to support you taking off time to go travel.
I say, it's not a question of having the money to travel.
Yeah.
The question is, a lawyer having the time to travel.
Right.
And that's really, I mean, ultimately that's the trade-off that lawyers deal with. You know, there are lots of studies suggesting that lawyers who make less money are typically happier.
Yep.
But you certainly don't get that impression from like the average OCI at an Ivy League institution. Mm-hmm. No one's telling you like, oh, maybe you want to go off and do something that's like more authentic to you instead of taking this big firm job. Mm-hmm. No one is saying that.
Yeah. And a coach once recommended to me, and I think this is something that comes out of, you know, the 10 tips for highly successful people or something like that, but is the idea that you should take time to write your own mission statement for your life, you know, not or your career, but really for your life. Like, what are the core values or pillars that you want your life to be measured against? And you can use those pillars to make decisions. You know, I think for Alison and I, when we think about our business, one of our things was we want our work life to be virtual. We want to be able to work from anywhere. That was when we got together and created this business. That was one of our main things. I remember talking about it.
And so we've done that.
And we have done that. But we have had to make strategic decisions, you know, to say all of our tutoring will be done remotely. All of our, you know, and, you know,
we will not have an office with an office phone number. We do not
office.
have an office fax number.
Exactly. You know, there are those moments where, you know, maybe opportunities come up or you start to question things, but then we always go back to like, nope, that was one of our, like, you know, pillars of what we wanted out of this business. And I think if you do that for your own life, you know, think about, and summers I think are great times to do this when you're not on the hamster wheel of school, but just take some time and sit back and say like, what do I really want in my life? What do I want space for? And then you can define success based on those kind of qualities that you think are going to be so critical to your happiness.
Right. And I think it's really critical to pay attention to your reaction to these summer jobs. Mm-hmm. You know, like looking back in retrospect, it was totally apparent that I was not well suited for any sort of big law job based on the experiences I had over several summers. I was a summer associate 3 times. You know, great hobby, really well paying. But, you know, I was doing things that, like, you know, literally hiding in the library because I didn't want to go to my office. Like, that's probably a sign that this was not going to be a great career path for me, but I ignored it.
Yeah.
You know, and I took the job anyway because everyone told me, like, that's what I needed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had this consulting career where I traveled all the time and I worked all the time and I was really unhappy. So I went back to law school and then I took a big corporate job where I worked all the time. I mean, when I was like, I kind of had that moment of like, doing the same thing over and over again and wanting a different result is the definition of insanity.
Yeah, and you're like, wait, this is starting to feel kind of familiar.
Right.
I've been here before. I just spent 2 years trying to get away from this.
Right. So I think it is really important that you spend more time thinking about that. And I think I did at that point, after graduation, but I kind of wish I'd thought a little bit more about that earlier.
Right, and it's easy to fall into the same pathways that got you to law school to begin with. If you've spent your entire academic career trying to be at the top of your class and doing really well and getting A's, like it's just really easy to continue doing that. And, and it takes a lot of sort of self-awareness to resist a lot of these pressures to do certain things that are, validating for your school. Like your school wants you to get a job. Your school prefers that it be highly paid. Right. Therefore, your school has an incentive to help you get a highly paid legal job that may not be the job you actually want.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so while you're doing all this stuff, number 9 on our to-do list, or our top 10 list, is you have to take care of yourself. And I think this is one other area that law students really struggle with, is they think they can just plow through this experience that's high stress, that, takes a lot of mental and emotional energy, and they can not sleep, eat like crap, not exercise, and then they'll manage to still be successful, not get sick, and not suffer from things like anxiety and depression.
Yeah, probably not so much.
No, that's why lawyers are alcoholics.
Yeah.
With really high rates of depression.
Well, and it starts in law school. By the end of the first semester, something like 30% of law students are clinically depressed.
Yeah, and
that's not healthy.
No, and I think some of that is avoidable through just respecting yourself and giving yourself some space to be a human being and take care of yourself. Do nice things for yourself. And that's not just like you have to go running. It's giving yourself space to take walks and go to movies.
And it's like maybe like running is like exercise is another source of stress. It's like, well, then just stop doing it for a while. Exactly. Like the world won't end if you just don't decide to go running for the day.
Exactly. But getting outside, moving your body away from the computer, going in, if you're into art, going to an art show, all that stuff, it like clears your head and,
or even just taking a nap.
Oh yeah. Naps are great.
It's like this whole, this sort of driven type A personalities that end up in law school, where suddenly like relaxation becomes something that gets scheduled. And like we are, don't get me wrong, we are fans of scheduling relaxation. We're fans of scheduling exercise, but it has to be done in a way that doesn't create more stress.
Yeah. And if you do get sick, you have to listen to your body and get better. I mean, I remember I got the flu in law school early on in second semester, and I was sitting in class, still in class, by the way. And my professor, I started seeing double. And I turned to my best friend in law school, and I'm like, I'm seeing 2 of Professor Caswan, so I feel like maybe I should go to the health center. And she's like, please leave. I'll give you all the notes. Just please leave. She's like, I don't want to sit next to you if you have a fever. Like, get out of this room.
I remember in architecture school, I had a stomach bug, and I was throwing up in the grocery store trying to buy something that would make me stop throwing up. And then I went to my studio where I was working on these projects, and I'm puking in the the trash can right beside of it. And it's the same thing. You're like, I have to keep going. And this friend of mine came up and she said, there's only one thing I could say to you right now that's going to make you go home. So I'm going to say that. And I was like, no, I'm fine. And she's like, you're going to destroy everything you've been working on if you puke on it. And I was like, oh my God, she's right. And I left and I went home and went to bed.
Yep. Yeah.
But you get crazy.
You do. And you think, well, there's no time for me to get sick. And it's like, well, it's true. It's not great to get sick, but what you really have no time for is to be sick for 2 weeks because you refuse to slow down and take care of yourself.
Yeah, and it's not like, if you're already sick, too bad. Sorry. Like, it's not a choice.
It's definitely not a choice.
Already happened. Deal with it.
All right. And now we're to our final one. Our number 10 on our top 10 list for law students is to try and keep everything in perspective.
Easier said than done.
Definitely easier said than done. We've all had our moments because law school is stressful, but in the end, it's a voluntary experience and it is just school.
And it's a privilege.
It is a privilege.
Think about all the people in the world. I'm not going to give you starving children in China, but, how many people in the world would love to have this opportunity?
Yeah.
And it should not be like day-to-day misery. And if it is, either this is not the right thing for you, or you need to figure out how to make it not so horrible.
Yep, it's so true. And sometimes life will create reality check moments for you. Sometimes things will happen that might snap you back to reality. Sometimes they can be really sad things that happen. Sometimes they can be really good things that happen. But, I think one of the ways that you can manage, staying in touch with reality is by hanging out with people who are not in law school.
Yeah, another great thing I think is doing some pro bono work. Mm-hmm. That can be a huge source of perspective when you're stressing out about some stupid thing, and you go to meet with your client who has been denied unemployment benefits, for example, and they're wondering how they're going to feed their child and keep a roof over their head. And it's suddenly this moment of oh my gosh, wow, my problems don't seem so bad right now.
Yeah, or domestic violence clients who are trying to get their kids away from abusive partners and are worried that the INS is going to come after them.
It's take your pick, Social Security benefits. I can't pay my rent. I can't eat. Pretty much anything you do as a pro bono case is going to provide some sort of perspective. Landlord-tenant stuff, these are real problems.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes even just by spending time with your friends that aren't in law school, going out, talking about what other people are doing in the world, just reminds you that law school is not the end all be all of everything.
Yeah, I remember I had lunch or dinner the night before my very first exam with a friend of mine who has nothing to do with the law, and I did it because I didn't want to think about or talk about the exam anymore. And he was just I don't care about your torts exam. I don't even know what a tort is. Come back to reality. Let's talk about, a movie I saw or a book I read. Right. And I was oh yeah, right.
Yeah, I still remember when I went to go sit for the bar exam, I stayed at a hotel, and my husband, who was not my husband at the time, he took me there to drop off all my stuff, and he's walking around, somebody who's not connected with the law, going, everybody here looks incredibly mentally ill. And I was like, no, what? Everybody's fine. I don't know what you're talking about.
You're this is normal. He's yeah, this is not actually normal. This is not how most of the world really lives their lives.
Exactly. So, it is just important. If you can keep things in perspective, it's easier to keep the growth mindset. It's easier to manage the stress, and it's easier to become successful because you remember that this is, a voluntary experience. It's a privilege, and it's just school. And if you work hard, you can probably be successful.
Exactly. And with that, we are out of time. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a second to leave us a review and rating on iTunes because we would really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. Our episodes typically come out on Mondays. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening. We'll talk soon, and thanks for 4 years.